banking sector is the pillar of support and growth for the Indian economy and one that continued functioning during last year's lockdown. This week on the Economic Times and IBM present Reshape Tomorrow, industry stalwarts talk to us about how they had to pivot their business and the rise of digitization in their business processes.
Hello and welcome to the special discussion as part of the Economic Times and IBM present Reshape Tomorrow. It's a series of in-depth discussions that we've been having with industry stalwarts to get their inputs on how they have seen their sectors evolve over the past year and how they are pivoting their organizations for the new normal. Now today we're taking a deep dive into the banking sector in India to talk about how the banking sector is the engine of India's growth revival. I have a panel of industry leaders, stalwarts, experts, and allow me to first up introduce them to you. We have Mr. Rajiv Anand, Executive Director, Wholesale Banking at Axis Bank. Mr. KVS Manian, Whole-Time Director and Member of Group Management Council at Kotak Mahindra Bank. Mr. Ajay K Khurana, Executive Director, Bank of Baroda. Mr. Murli Ramakrishnan, MD and CEO, South Indian Bank. Mr. Vasudevan PN, MD and CEO, Equitas Small Finance Bank. Mr. K. Ramachandran, Executive Director, Indian Bank. And Mr. Sandeep Patel, the MD at IBM India and South Asia. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining me here today. Before we kickstart, Sandeep, just wanted to bring you in. If you could just kickstart the proceedings with an opening note.
Thank you, Sunil. So look, I'll make a few points, both from a global and an India perspective. I think as we look around the world, global banking is reorganizing itself from being an aggregator of liabilities, loans, remittances, and advice to the creator of trust-based ecosystem and differentiated service delivery offering, that offers customer-centric experiences. I think that is becoming a norm around the world. The banks are moving from products to channels to platforms and more importantly to experiences. Compliance and increased regulatory rigor are defining investments, and this requires a focus on operational efficiencies and data robustness. Today, experience is everything. Banks need to reimagine their customer experience strategies both for online and offline channels. Innovation is being driven by creating new and personalized lending solutions which are powered by artificial intelligence. There's a group of 44 in IBM Industry Academy and Academy of Technology experts across 11 countries that focus on the banking sector per se. And they have identified 8 technology trends for the banking sector for this year. And these include the following: muted financial performance, increasing open and free data, accelerated digital adaptation, operational resilience, new cloud-based operating models, security and fraud risks, really important, I think, in the world that we are living in, escalating competition, and new ways of working. These tech trends will outline the transformational journey of the banking ecosystem in 2021 and beyond. And I'm really excited to be a part of this panel discussion where we are already witnessing these technologies come to life in all of your organizations. Thank you. Looking forward to the session.
Fantastic, Sandeep. Yes, exactly, because there is so much of technology, and not just technology, that's a really important part, but just how banks have pivoted over this last year. So that's what I want to start off the panel with. I'd like to start with Mr. Manian. So at Kotak Mahindra Bank, obviously, what were some of the steps taken by your bank during this lockdown to kind of overcome these challenges and ensure it was smooth running for the bank as well as for your customers?
The big thing we saw is that customers themselves, became far more digitally inclined, and the adoptions became very good. For example, we've been struggling for doing digital documentation on our loans. Yeah. And it was always possible even before the pandemic. But for some reason, our internal team, customers, somehow it will not happen, right? And come pandemic, in some of our businesses, for example, when we ran the government's ECLGS scheme, 98% of our loans were done digitally without having to visit the customer. So kind of transformation. So as I often tell my team, sometimes, it's like for decades nothing happened, and sometimes suddenly in a week decades happen, and that's the story. In many of the transformations of this kind. Projects which would have otherwise taken us 1 year sitting at home got executed in a couple of months. For example, we changed our trade documentation. Customers could give documentation online, right? It was a project that we could have done probably earlier, but the pandemic just dramatically changed the speed of some of these projects. And I think it has been an amazing story.
Absolutely. I'll just come to Mr. Rajiv Anand. So, similar question to you at Axis. How have you seen, I mean, the challenges we kind of know what banks have gone through, but how have you been able to overcome the same over the past 1 year?
It's important for all of you and the viewers to understand that work from home didn't mean that, that all of us had access to email and, some internal application, etc. But the fact that all of us had access through a VPN network to all the systems of the bank. Yeah. And so therefore, instead of coming to office, you're doing everything from home. So it was literally being able to do anything that you could do coming to office, from home. And that is such a fundamental change that has actually happened. And I agree with everything that Manian said, that in terms of being able to serve your customers, we did large transactions, small transactions, loans were getting approved, foreign exchange transactions were getting done, LCs were open, bank guarantees were open. It didn't feel like we were shut down for all. We were able to serve our customers in a seamless manner. It's very important for you to also understand that we talk about digital and how digital has accelerated, but the digital journey was not started on 23rd of March. Most banks went down the digital journey at least about 7 to 8 years before this. And because that infrastructure was in place, the ability to therefore adapt that and drive adaptability with your customers was also that much faster.
Sir, at Bank of Baroda also, things have been very different. What are some of the operational challenges that you have faced? How have you overcome these? And your thoughts on that?
With sudden breakdown of pandemic and lockdown, there were so many operational challenges were thrown on nearly every bank. The biggest challenge was how to make sure delivery of minimum banking services. For any purchase, anything you need money, and people were really reluctant to move out, and we had an issue. Our staff, we had to make them keep the branches open, maintain cash, ensure that our ATMs are working, they are filled up. There is no network issue, and in rural and semi-urban area, the business correspondents are providing service to every customer. So all the challenges were there. Another challenge was to make sure that our staff and our customers are safe and they are following social distancing norms also. The pace of digitalization, as everybody is telling, that has to be increased. Going digital is not only an option for us; it is a compulsion to stay in the business. It's a matter of survival now.
Exactly.
So, most of our customer, we have been working on it in Bank of Baroda. We are very aggressive to transform the bank. Most of our customer acquisition we have started on our tablets, and video KYC also we have initiated where customer can open the account sitting at home. That also is going to come very soon. And all this digital lending also we have been working very aggressively. End-to-end digital products will be lending products will be available on our mobile app, on our website.
Managing operations where you've done it in the offline mode earlier or in pre-COVID times and then continuing during lockdown, yes, challenging. But managing things when you weren't there in the pre-COVID and then continue, starting afresh during the lockdown. Your thoughts on how those challenges were overcome at your end?
Really amazed to see the kind of preparedness with which this bank has been run. As Rajay put it rightly, these digital initiatives were not something which these banks were starting to take when the pandemic happened. I think some of these banks have actually invested quite a bit over the last few years thanks to various other developments in the entire ecosystem. The bank has invested quite extensively in the area of technology, and I was amazed to see the preparedness of the bank in handling so many challenges without really sweating too much. And the entire branches, almost 99% plus of the branches were pretty much operational during this phase. And overnight they were able to make the employees work from home, which means laptops were available, laptops were provided to them, systems were made available, thanks to telecom network, etc. And believe me, we are not in all the major, not just in major urban centers. We are present in some of the semi-urban, rural locations also. So really making these employees work from their own branches as well as from their work environment and from their home environment. I think a lot of efforts have probably gone in to the bank over the last few years to really make it a reality.
Mr. Vasudevan, what Mr. Murli is saying about how their bank is quite active in the rural areas. Now, your bank is also working with this underserved section of society. So these are the everyday, maybe, the bottom of the economic pyramid who need small loans, who need to repay those small loans. And with the lockdown coming in, those guys were the ones that were badly hit. We've all heard about the unfortunate migrants moving back, and that was really heartbreaking and unfortunate. But over this whole period, what were some things done at Equitas to kind of help your customers here?
Like other speakers were mentioning, obviously it was a once in a lifetime kind of an event. But we got an inkling of that, because if you remember, about a week before the actual lockdown was imposed, there was a lot of discussion amongst all of us about an impending lockdown. I think that we had about a week's time, if you all remember, and so we actually had to kind of get into a quick mode and start buying or renting a lot of laptops, because a lot of our data entry operators, they don't have a computer at home, and you can't take the physical desktop home either. So we had to actually do a lot of scurrying around and getting a lot of laptops on hire on rental basis, and ensure that everybody had the one at their homes. And we did an IPO during the lockdown. I mean, I couldn't imagine that, you can do an IPO sitting at home without doing your, Hong Kong leg and the Europe leg and the US leg, no leg and nothing. We're just sitting at home, and we did the entire IPO itself. And we introduced a COVID insurance, and it just kind of took off. For the first about 6 months or so, it just sold, it's in very, very large numbers. I mean, obviously there's a lot of concern amongst, people, amongst customers, a lot of concern about this COVID and its potential financial impact if somebody should contract that virus. And so when we were able to introduce that COVID insurance very quickly, it just kind of took off. I mean, the huge number of people bought into that policy.
I think April 2020 was when Indian Bank and Allahabad Bank, the merger happened, the amalgamation happened. That's again, the lockdown had started then. So while obviously things were planned in advance, but the execution was happening during this full phase. So how did you manage that? How was the digital systems brought into amalgamate as well?
Just as COVID struck us, it was the other shock was the amalgamation of Allahabad Bank into Indian Bank, which means that we need to harmonize the products, policies, processes, HR and technology, all this in place. And all this were happening through either video conference or Zooms. So small teams were created and each one was asked to integrate, and this was coordinated by the Integration Management Office and the Top Management Steering Committee, which was meeting over a video conference every week and then trying to assess what is the extent of development done and what is the gaps which we need to address. During the demonetization phase, we are creating the acceptance infrastructure, but then the people moving to digital was less. Now, when it came to COVID, we saw a new set of customers also adopting to digital, like the housewives, the senior citizens who were not taking to digital also moved to digital because it was a contactless purchases they were making, contactless deliveries happening. So therefore, we saw a new section of people also coming into the digital forum, which was one good thing which we saw. And the other one was the audit functions became digital. The central statutory auditors who normally visit units and then verify the documents, the loan documents, the data, all of them now we were able to provide all that digitally, and then they were able to sit in their offices and then do the audit functions also seamlessly for the year end as well as the various quarters which we had during that period.
Welcome back to the Economic Times and IBM present Reshape Tomorrow, where we're in conversation with banking experts who share their insights on what lies ahead for the sector.
So I'll take this point ahead to Sandeep. So Sandeep, we've heard the 6 bankers tell us about how their operations pivoted, how they overcame challenges. A lot of, almost all of them have spoken about, using using technology where to ensure banking started happening digitally, etc., all of this. While we've not said the word cybersecurity, everybody means that when you're ensuring that your transactions are smoothly done. Wanting to get your insights on this, Sandeep.
I think cybersecurity has always been an issue in I guess any industry, but more so in the financial services industry. The pandemic has also reshaped what is considered critical infrastructure today. And as that happens, I think the attackers, the cyber attackers, if you will, they've been taking note, right? And they've been obviously at their business. So let me give you a couple of other data points. So we have something called the X-Force Threat Intelligence Index. And according to the 2021 X-Force Threat Intelligence Index, India was the second most attacked country in Asia Pacific. Second to Japan, I believe. Attacks in India made up 7% of all attacks X-Force observed in Asia in 2020. So cybersecurity, cyber threats, they are real. I think we will continue to see attackers getting more and more sophisticated, and this is where getting robust solutions inbuilt into every layer of the banking infrastructure, I think is very, very critical.
The fact that private banks can now get government business, which will lead to development of the economy and also customer convenience. Now, Axis Bank has been doing this for a while, but your thoughts on how you see this impacting the growth of private banks over the next financial year? In the short term, the next financial year just now.
I think that is very, very positive. The government will benefit because there will be better technology, better service that will come to the governments. The private sector banks will benefit because hopefully we'll make some fee and float out of this. But I think most important, I think it is just going to optimize the flow of money from the central government all the way down to the panchayats. I think the flow of money is only going to get better with the use of technology, with the use of optimization, and that is certainly going to help the country at large and its citizenry. So I think it's a very positive move. The government has brought in more competition, and competition, as we have seen, is always beneficial for the consumer.
Absolutely. Mr. Manian, I will come to you now on another point that the finance minister made during the union budget, where she spoke about the constitution of a bad bank and also recapitalization of some public sector banks. Your thoughts on the impact of these on the sector and the economy as a whole?
Those are really welcome moves because if you want to really get economy going, you need a very strong financial sector. And like you mentioned, the financial sector, if it is hobbled by bad assets, poorly capitalized banks, it doesn't help the economy overall, because if you need economy to grow, you need a strong financial system which will fuel that growth. I think it cleans up the balance sheet of the banks and parks the problem, isolates the problem into a separate entity, a bad bank, and therefore leaves the banks to manage their good assets and growth better for future, right? So that is one thing it does. I think it isolates it. Second, I think by removing these assets out, with the improvement in the balance sheet, it improves the ability of those banks to raise capital.
Thank you for that viewpoint, Mr. Manian. I want to come now to Mr. Ramachandran, sir, at Indian Bank. On 5th of February, the RBI Monetary Policy Committee decided to keep the repo rate unchanged at 4%. How do you see this impacting SMEs and corporate India?
Now we see that there is an economic activity getting fired up, and we see that people are coming up for several other projects now. And the government also has increased their spend, and it is more of an expansionary budget, which was more growth oriented, and there is an infrastructure push. Once the infrastructure push is there, it cascades into various levels of industry, like the iron and steel gets in, the cement gets in, and all other sectors also will be benefited.
For the way ahead, While we've all spoken about digital banking, and yes, digital banking gaining more and more traction, more and more acceptance, what is Equitas's plan for the way ahead?
In terms of our digital initiatives, we have a very different profile of our depositors compared to our borrowers. As I mentioned, our borrowers are people who are very small entrepreneurs running small enterprises. But their surplus money available in their hands is insufficient to satisfy our deposit requirements. So our deposit customers are of a very different profile from our borrowers. So basically we have the mass and the mass affluent segment from where we mobilize our deposits. And there has been a lot of digital initiatives that we have been taking right from the time we started as a bank. We have been very strong in our digital focus.
I want to get Mr. Khurana in the mix. How have your customers reacted to your digital initiatives at Bank of Baroda?
Our mobile banking app users have been doubled.
Right.
And WhatsApp banking also recently started, but people are accepting it a lot. So now the customers are really, they want to go digital because of various issues, various, pandemic has, what the pandemic has shown as a new world. So the only thing is that they want hand-holding initially. So I think that level we have been working to handhold and increase our adoption. So we have been very successful in that.
For the way ahead, what are some challenges that you are seeing for your bank and for the sector, the banking sector, and how can these be overcome?
Q3, Q4 of almost all the banks, we might be witnessing some surge in terms of their delinquencies, etc. And therefore, depending on their own position in terms of capital adequacy or provision coverage, etc. Obviously, each bank will have its own strategy to be laid down for strengthening their balance sheet and looking at the opportunities differently. So that's going to be one. And the second thing is clearly, as said by some other panelists, during the COVID situation, with particularly the MSME, SME, even some of the corporate customers, obviously got impacted both on the supply side as well as on the demand side. Therefore, the business models are also coming under question.
Sandeep, finally coming to you for the last word on this panel as we close it. Your thoughts, how you are seeing the banking sector evolve on the way ahead?
So I think the question, and I think many others made the point as well, how are you as an institution and how you differentiate, how you become relevant, and more importantly, as you become more of your customers, talk about lifestyle or supply chain, how are you creating differentiated experiences that make you more and more relevant to your end customer as well?
Well, thank you, gentlemen, for that absolute fantastic panel. I personally have learned so much, and I'm sure our viewers are also taking back these really important points about how banks need to be agile, how to use technology, but also ensuring the robustness, the security of the networks, collaboration, important about the idea about how, well, there's going to be a lot of consolidation on the way ahead and how banks need to differentiate themselves on the way ahead. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you here. Thank you so much for your time.